Thank you all for joining us this morning. I will be up here for a short time, but my name is Jakiva Morgan. I am the director of the Lab at Concord Business Incubator and Accelerator. I am very excited to welcome you all to the space. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, but just wanted to give you a little background on who we are and what we do here. We are a business education center where we built up a space for our community, built by us and for us, where we empower, encourage, and educate Black-owned businesses in our communities. Not only is our space open to Black-owned businesses in the community, but we also welcome community members to come in, collaborate with one another, exchange ideas, and continue to add to this ecosystem that we've built. I want to say thank you to G&E, Quinnipiac University, and our board chair, Carlton Highsmith, for making this workshop series possible. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome up our first speaker for today, Mustafa Analui, who is the Carlton Highsmith Chair of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Director for the M&T Bank Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and also the Teaching Professor of Entrepreneurship and Strategy. Welcome up, Mustafa.
Thank you, Kiva. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Last night I prepared my notes for a 2-hour opening remarks. I was mentioning to Carlton that I left my notes in the garage this morning. So I'll give you the 3-minute version of that. So this idea that we are here for it together started with a meeting that Carlton and Peter and I, with the Dean of the School of Business, had last fall. We were discussing what are the options and priorities to support minority-based businesses in our community. A number of conversations happened, different directions that we went. And one of the idea that came up is, as small companies, startups get started, they have a series of challenges. When they grow up, the type of challenges shifts. They need more capital. Capital structuring becomes important. How do you structure an M&A deal and partnership with a large organization? And that's the idea behind these workshops that we are starting today. And the intent is to provide in-depth overview of critical issues for minority businesses as they grow and they get bigger. What are the options for them? You can stay in a standalone private company, public market, and more importantly, access to capital to grow. How do you do that? And the type of transactions that come with it. So this is going to be a series of workshops covering those areas. And today's we have outstanding keynote speakers. And for each topic, we will have appropriate participants such as angel investors, venture capitalists, private equities, investment bankers, legal firms that are doing these type of transactions, as well as the commercial banks. I think this would be a wonderful opportunity, not only to learn, also stay around and network after each meetings. This is a hybrid mode. We know that not everybody can join us in person. The intent is to record these events and have this as a library available to all businesses around us. We are very delighted to have you here. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Peter to come and present. Peter requires.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Peter Hurst. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. And I want to just tell you, why are we doing this today? There's several reasons. I want to make sure that you understand that MBE growth is critically important. We're here today because of a conversation Carlton and I had about 4 or 5 years ago, where I shared some information about the number and size of MBEs in Connecticut versus the rest of New England. And he, like I, were taken aback at the discrepancy between Connecticut and Massachusetts. So we've been talking ever since about what can we do to fix that. So let me just touch first on why MBE growth is important, because that's what this whole series is about. Minority businesses are important contributors to the Connecticut economy and the US economy. Why? They generate economic output directly and indirectly. They create and maintain jobs, especially with people of color. They generate tax revenue. And as Carlton is a great example, they're servant leaders in the communities in which they operate. And why is this important? Because the Connecticut economy and the US economy is suffering from a racial wealth gap. And minority business development is an effective lever to reduce that racial wealth gap. And that racial wealth gap is important because wealth or the lack thereof affects a family's spending power. And the effect on family spending power affects, where you live, where you can send your kids to school, the quality of health care you receive, whether you have the funds to start or grow a business. It affects everything that we do. So we have the thesis that if we can reduce this racial wealth gap, we can really have a positive impact on the economy here in Connecticut, as well as the economy in the United States. Now, you might be surprised at the economic contributions that minority businesses make. If we look at nationally, if we look at minority businesses with paid employees, since I mentioned that one of the big contributors is the fact that they, create and maintain jobs, there are 1.2 million minority-owned businesses in this country with paid employees. Those companies have 1.6 trillion in aggregate revenue and 9.9 million employees. So that gives you a real quick snapshot of the contribution that they make. And if we look closer to home, in Connecticut, and this is 2018 data, there are 70,000 minority-owned companies in Connecticut, and that's 30% of all of the minority-owned companies in New England. And what got Carlton and I so worked up is that Massachusetts has 56% of all of the minority-owned companies in New England. And if you look at minority-owned companies with paid employees, that relationship is also in place. Of the minority-owned companies in the New England marketplace with paid employees, 30% are here in Connecticut, 56% are in Massachusetts. So that's a concern. And this relationship even extends to my organization in terms of the minority businesses that we've certified. Minority-owned businesses in Connecticut represent 31% of all of the businesses we've certified, but they only have 19% of the aggregate revenue. Again, Massachusetts has 50% of the minority-owned businesses in New England that we've certified, but they represent 64% of the aggregate revenue. So we really want to do something about that. There are two ways you can grow. A lot of folks thinking about growing what I call organically, which is you grow one contract at a time or one customer at a time. And that works. But given how far behind we are, not just the minority business community in general, but here in Connecticut, we got to speed up this process. And a great way to speed up this process is using inorganic growth strategies like mergers, acquisitions, and joint ventures. Because if we do that, we can really, make what we want to see happen, which is to reduce that gap between Connecticut and the rest of New England very quickly. So the benefits of inorganic growth, you can enter a new market or expand vertically or horizontally by acquiring incremental cash flow, incremental revenue and customers. You can use inorganic growth strategies to upgrade your management team. You can use it to acquire business infrastructure and systems. And sometimes you use it just to destroy a competitor. And all of that is part of why, we're doing this series. This is not going to be a theoretical aspirational approach. For those of you who are in this room and those of you who will attend in the future, we're looking for 3 different categories of potential acquirers. We're looking for existing minority-owned businesses that want to grow their business inorganically through mergers, acquisitions, and joint ventures. We're looking for newly created minority-owned businesses that are going to buy subsidiaries or divisions from corporate America. And because there's a big graying of America in this country, we want to have new or existing minority-owned businesses buy existing non-diverse businesses where the owner is near retirement age and they don't have a succession plan. So at the end of the series, we hope we give you the framework to do this. This multi-session series is going to cover a lot of things, as just mentioned. Deal sourcing, the options of inorganic growth strategies, mergers, acquisitions, and joint ventures. How do you finance the transaction, with senior debt, mezzanine capital, equity capital, the accounting issues that you need to consider, the legal issues you need to consider, and probably one of the most important things, what happens after you close the deal? Because everything works well in a computer model, but to make it work in the real world, you have to have a real strategy for post-closing implementation. So I'd like to, in my brief summary, my colleagues told me, let's end with a call to action. So my call of action is twofold. One, this country and this state needs minority-owned businesses to grow and prosper so that they can make economic and other contributions to our communities. And the final thing I'm going to say before I introduce our next speaker, and this is something I really hope you take to heart. We're in a crisis right now in this country. We've been dealing with this for years, but it's been more acute since the Supreme Court decision in the Harvard admissions case. It's really accelerated under the new administration. But I want to leave you with this thought. No one is going to come save us but us. So we can't wait for someone else to do it. We got to do it for ourselves. So with this, I'd like to introduce one of our important speakers. And I'm going to plagiarize a line he made in this building about 2 years ago. The reason we want to have this gentleman, and we're going to have Carlton talk to you, because Taurus made a point. He said, look, if you can see it, you can be it. Or if you can see it, you can believe it. We want you to believe and see that these 2 gentlemen, Taurus and Carlton, have used this inorganic growth strategy to grow their business, to generate economic output. They've created jobs, and now they are servant leaders in the communities in which they operate. So let me just briefly introduce Taurus. Taurus is the CEO of IMB Partners. It's an acquisition-driven business that invests in middle-market companies that provide services to the utility sector and government agencies, with a focus on women and minority business initiatives and solutions. IMB has over $1 billion in revenue and 700 employees via 8 partner companies. I'm sure Taurus is going to tell you about it, so I'll skip over that. But prior to starting IMB, Taurus was the co-founder and manager of ICB Partners. In addition, he has served as CEO and/or lead director of the following companies: Chunks Foods, Gulf Coast Securities Ghana, the Hilsigan Company, and PFN. He's also the founder of the Council of Urban Professionals and the founding board chair of the All-Star Code. Taurus received his BS in accounting from Purdue University, and he also received an MBA from the Harvard Business School, where he was a Robert Togo Fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present Taurus Richardson.
Hi, Peter. Just confirming you guys can hear me okay? Doing a sound check. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Well, first, man, Peter, thank you very much for the invitation. Carlton Highsmith and Jake, thank you so much for to return to present to this group. Um, I am just sort of heart and soul committed to, sort of this journey of advocating for minority and business development, for, espousing the virtue of entrepreneurship through acquisition. And when I come to presentations like this, I start with a quick sort of let me go back before you hear that bio. How did it all begin? And for me, my parents, my mom was a high school graduate. My dad enlisted in, the Army, served in the Air Force, didn't finish high school, ultimately got a GED. But they had a dream to be entrepreneurs. And so when I was 9, they purchased what was a local bar um, in 1978. We converted it into the first black bar in the western suburbs of Chicago. And, 48 years later, we're still up and running and operating and serving our community. Um, we followed that up and that was a $120,000 purchase. And so sometimes when you talk mergers and acquisitions, it's big. This was a local small acquisition. They then bought a popcorn business called Really Poppin'. It was 31 flavors of popcorn in Chicago. And, we had a plant and then we had a retail store and a shopping center. We then bought or expanded into a few other retail stores. And so we learned production, we learned, sort of logistics, mailing, product for Christmas sales. But by the time I'm 17, 18 years old, I've been working in my family businesses as the parking lot, cleaner upper, you know, food prep person for parties for nightclubs, and then both retail production and logistics and distribution for the popcorn business. So I come from business background by grace from my parents, but I also saw them buy it versus start it. So to Peter's point, the thing I know most is that many startups, something like 70, 80, 90% of them fail in the first 5 years. And most acquisitions succeed 70% of the time in the first 5 years. If you buy a proven business with a proven operator, that's not a turnaround. You basically buy something that's working, there's a good chance you can keep making it work. And so from, the time I was a teenager, my dream was to basically buy businesses. And I'd say one last thing before I go to IMB. In 1987, there's this gentleman, Reginald Lewis, who bought TLC Beatrice International, which was a $985 million acquisition, the first by an African American, but effectively rounded up billion-dollar business. And he made Forbes 400 list and created $400 million of wealth for his family over the course of a decade. And the power to create wealth, the power to then invest in community and philanthropy, and then just to have financial freedom, I believe comes through acquisition. And so that's why I'm so excited about it. So with that, if you could flip the page. So just by way of background, IMB stands for Investors in Minority Business. We try to do smaller deals, so 2 million of EBITDA to 10, typically 20 to 100 million of revenue. We've decided to focus on two sectors, which is utility infrastructure. Think an electrical contractor, a gas contractor to a utility, the veg management, landscaping, and tree trimming service for either commercial, DOT, or utility. Government contracting, either IT service provider, facility management. We, in our particular case, do military food contracting, etc. Our values are partnership and people first and entrepreneurial approach. We think you got to treat people the way you want to be treated, and you got to have a mindset for how do you make something better and how do you create wealth. Peter mentioned the numbers. We have $1 billion plus business, now about 800 employees. Since I was last with you in 2023, we went out and raised a institutional fund with 125 million of capital and have made, now 9 platform investments. If we could flip the page. The sectors we play in, the reason why we got to them is we were looking for businesses that had steady in both good markets and down markets. So when COVID happened, our truck stopped, providing electrical service maintenance for about 2 or 3 days. And then they were ordered or deemed to be mission critical. And our men and women went back to work, making sure that everyone had their light and their power, et cetera, et cetera. And the same, we ran the portal for, say, the city of Fairfax County in Virginia. And, that internet access to the government was critical. And so, targeting businesses that have steady revenues and steady cash flows has been a good place. I will say with the new Trump administration, with Doge coming in, with the anti-MBE that Peter referenced, like there's an alarm at the gate. The federal contracting space is no longer this sort of steady Eddie business. They're really trying to cut costs in terms of people and contractors. So as a strategy, we put that on hold in the last 4 months as we wait to let that settle down and to figure out if it's a good place to continue to invest. As you think about building a strategy for acquisitions, we try to figure out how to find things that not everybody else loves. And so, business school and business teaches avoid customer concentration. We look for it. We want customer concentration where it's a sticky subject matter expertise industry like electrical contracting, engineering services, software, versus selling a product to Walmart where there's 50 people competing every day, because there you can get more discontinuation. We do union investing. We look at bonded deals. We spend time developing relationships where we can help not just own the business, but generate revenue, and we'll talk about it. And then we just focus on industries that, um, quite frankly, we think stay open. If the business goes down, again, if markets close down, if it's a critical business, it'll still be open the next day. So that's what we do and how we focused on the sectors we did. If you could flip. In terms of our portfolio, we have 3 IT related businesses on the left. We have the utility businesses we've talked about. And just because we're in the New England Minority Supplier Development Council, our food businesses started with an acquisition that was in Massachusetts. It was a $50 million revenue business owned by Michelle Keating. Her dad had started this business in 50 years earlier. We purchased in 2016, and she had become the president by 2000, 2001 or something like that. And she had grown it to 50 million of revenue, 3 of EBITDA. They were supplying the commissaries for the grocery stores and military, both domestically and overseas. She wanted a partner, and then she wanted a sort of structured exit where she could retire over the coming 2 to 3 years. We paid effectively $9 million or 3 times for that business, $9 to $10 million for the business. We wind up recruiting what was a African American to take over the leadership of the business. It's in Walpole, Mass. And over the course of the last 9 years, I'd say that business then bought a sister company called Elite Brands, which had, call it 70 million of revenue and 5 of, sort of profits for 5 times, so roughly 25, 26 million. And today, those 2 combined business at 50 and 70 have about 140 of revenue, and the 3 and the 5 have about 12 million of profit. So in addition to acquiring business, we've actually organically grown it through revenue growth as well. And then we also bought in 2020 a $120 million food supplier to military that instead of the grocery stores, is in the dining halls. And so in the course of $50 million business, $34 million of profit. We recently recapped it last year where we took out $150 million distribution. And it's about building great businesses. It's about making sure you have a great workforce. But at the end of the day, it's about making money for yourself and your shareholders. And so those people that invested, for example, in Alder in 2016, we've generated 15 times their money. So if you're giving me $100,000, we would return to you $1.5 million, in the course of the 8 years. And you still have another 1.5 to $2 million working. So it'll turn out that those investors will make 30 to 40 times their money off of just their one investment in 2016. And so why you do it is to make money, to build businesses you're proud of, and to keep at it, if that makes any sense. So in the Massachusetts or New England Council, today we show up with a business with $140, $150 million in your council. We flip the slide. Just by way of what you do when you buy a business, you start out with due diligence, you close, you try to come up with a work plan that says, hey, how do I think about what people I need? How do I think about the one or two things that we can do strategically to really move the business from an organic growth perspective? Is all what you do in your first 100 days post-close. We use and we recommend to small businesses with 2,000 to 5,000 employees something called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a system that is, you can go online, search for it. There's a book called Traction that we encourage people to read. And it basically is, now used by over 10,000 small businesses. And it helps you set a 5-year or 10-year strategic vision, a 1-year sort of goal plan, quarterly sort of, targets and goals, an accountability system, and a way to just sort of try to get your management team and all of your employees to know where are you going as a company when you buy a business. You have to focus on making sure the management team owns with you. So we usually give 10 to 20% of the stock appreciation rights or stock options to our team so that when we win, they win with us. We focus on growing revenue. And then even after you buy the first deal, like in the case of Alder, we look selectively to make additional acquisitions to eliminate a competitor. If I take from the slide Peter had earlier in his presentation. So that's our value creation process. I'll flip one more page. And then the last, example in addition to Alder is simply, we bought a business in Philadelphia. It was 10 million in revenue to a profit. When we found it, it was an entrepreneur, a white gentleman who was looking for a partner to provide capital and strategic support to help him grow. We paid 4 times for the business, so it was an $8 million acquisition price. And he was doing project management and construction management for capital programs in gas and electric for one utility, which was Philadelphia Electric Company. We did a 100-day plan. We did a retreat. We hired people. We hired some recruiters. We implemented EOS, which I mentioned. And in the end, we put a lot of money into hiring more people at roughly $300,000 to $500,000 who had 20 to 30 years experience at Pico and surrounding markets like Baltimore and Atlantic City. And man, good things happened. The business grew. Pardon me, I said 10 from 15 million to call it 42 million over the course of 4 years. EBITDA went from 2 to 9 on an actual basis. On a recurring basis, it was 10. We got longer term contracts. We grew the employee base from 90 to 200. We put a lot of diversity initiatives in. So minority workforce went from 6 to 23 and women from 9 to 28. Effectively every other person we hired, under our ownership was a diverse person. We ultimately sold that business 4.5 years later. We sold it off of 10 million and a 7 times purchase price. So for $70 million. We had paid 8. And so if you had given us $100,000 in 2018 when we bought the business, we would have returned to you $2.7 million. And so you can make tremendous profit and tremendous wealth for yourself. In my case, I had probably 15 or 16 friends and colleagues invest with me. So I didn't go get institutional capital. I basically raised money at 25 to 50 to 100,000 to $200,000 from friends. And then we return 27 times that money to them. And so you do this again to build great businesses. You do it to employ great workforce and create wealth for the local community. But you also do it to make money for yourself and your family. And so with that, let me pause and I'm happy to take any questions.
I'd like to open up the floor for any questions. Anyone have questions in person? While we're taking in-person questions, we'll have some questions coming through the chat as well. I'll make my way back to you. Taurus, they're asking, are you looking for new investors?
We just closed our fund in December, and so we are not likely to be out for new investment for another 3 years. But I will say in that, the one comment is, so I'm doing this for purpose as much as anything else. And so most people try to raise money from large pension funds and from high net worth families. And my view is, while pension funds have a lot of diversity in them, high net worth families making money for the Walton family is a neat thing to do, but it's not what I'm trying to do. And so I have been fortunate to have 100 people invest in the fund we raised in December. We went out to raise 100, we raised 125. And as important as we raised more than we wanted, the more important thing to me is 65 of those 100 investors are women and African Americans and Latin Americans and Asian. I'm the largest investor in the fund, and we're doing this with a diversity mindset, not just in the type of businesses we want to buy and build, but also with a shareholder base that reflects diversity as well.
Thank you, Taurus. We have one more question up here.
Thanks, Taurus. Could you talk a little bit about how you go about sourcing your target companies?
Sure. So the world of buying businesses has become more competitive. There's things called search funders, or people coming out of college or business school or working in corporations who are now, they number 4,000 to 5,000 people who are out here trying to find one company. There's more private equity firms out here. And so as more competition space of buying businesses, my experience has taught me that I had to focus. And so step one is being clear in these 12 months, 36 months, what your sweet spot target companies are, and not chasing many things. What that has done for me is if I wanted, like now I'm looking at veg management, gas companies, water companies, and substations that support data centers, right? And so now I can go into ChatGPT even and say, hey, give me a list of every substation contractor supporting data centers in the Northeast or in Maryland, wherever I'm interested in doing business. And I can get a very defined target list of contractors. I can get a list of their customers. I can go to school and be smart. As you go to school and be smart, you then meet the founders of these companies through direct email campaigns, through outreach by phone calls, and participation in regional conferences and networking. And when you show up, you don't just say, hey, I want to buy your company. You say, look, I've fallen in love with the substation market. We've talked to over 50, 100 people. We've identified you as someone that we love to talk about and need capital. We would love to be your partner. That founder receives it as, wow, you like me. You've taken the time to understand my business, and they'll give you more chance, more time. You still got to put in the reps. It'll be this year we'll see 1,000, we'll make 1,000 direct contacts to founders in hopes of buying 2 to 3 companies.
Thank you, Taurus. We have another question in person here for you. Folks in the chat, we don't have any questions yet, but get them in while you can because Taurus is on the road, so.
And I'm sorry I'm not able to be with you, but I really, really appreciate what you guys are doing and the workshop and program you're putting forth to try to encourage more people to think about entrepreneurship through acquisition.
Well, we appreciate you sharing your experience with us. I have a pretty basic question. You mentioned that you made an investment, a platform investment, and you made 9 of them. Can you explain what a platform investment means? And maybe an example of
Think
1 or
about
2
it.
of the 9.
So in the case of the food business, you got to start somewhere. So platform means the first investment. And so in the case of the food holding company, we first bought Alder. We took 2 years, so in 2016, I bought that business and I actually didn't make the next acquisition in the food holding company, so to speak, until I learned the business, I paid down the debt, I built out a management team, and then I was ready to go. And so then I went looking for additional acquisitions, and I bought initially Richmond as an add-on acquisition, and I bought Elite as an add-on acquisition. So the platform is the first one, and then when you add some of the on piece, it becomes the add-on to the platform. That's what it means from a jargon speak. I apologize.
Thank you, Taurus. We have another question here in person.
Good morning, Taurus, and thank you for your time and educating us this morning. My question is, considering your family's background in acquisition and retail particularly, are you thinking about adding retail and other sectors that are similar to that to your portfolio for acquisition? So other than food and construction services, et cetera?
So I've spent I started out thinking I knew retail, right? Because I sold, fraternity paraphernalia. I sold popcorn. We owned a retail shoe business at my previous firm called Marshall Retail Group. So you may know it from airports and the casinos in Las Vegas. And so we made good money in retail investment. We owned, you may know, um, Spirit of Chicago, Spirit of Baltimore, Spirit of New York. We had a dinner cruise boat business that was quasi retail where, we were in 6 markets with 20 boats and took people out on 3-hour excursions. And retail can be very successful, right? Um, I go back to where I got focus was I want to make sure I'm open on good and bad days. And so in the pandemic, some retail went and did really well, but a whole lot of retail went out of business and didn't make the conversion to the rainy day, if that makes any sense. Second, the barrier to entry is lower. If you put up a hot restaurant this week, you know, it's going to be hot until the next hot restaurant comes up and they're going to pull some of your customer base. And so, what I don't love about retail is the lack of a barrier to entry or the entry of additional competition. So if all I got is one check to write, one investment to make, my first idea is how do I go someplace where there's less competition, which will likely mean I can have more steady revenue and maybe even a higher profit margin. And retail, I know it pretty well. My partners retail, but relative to investing in, I'm looking at water treatment plants for fracking to take the water from fracked sort of um, areas into water treatment to recycle the water or substations. The number of people that can do that are like 100 in the country. The number of people that can do retail is like a billion, right? There's no barrier. And so when you think about a strategy, it doesn't mean that you can't make great money. And obviously, lots of people make money in retail. I'm just trying to avoid competition and to try to not have businesses that go dark if, the economy turns down.
Thank you, Taurus. Going to allow our co-directors to bring in some questions that we have coming in from the chat.
Okay, so we have a couple questions in the chat. The first question is, given the current competitive landscape, what are the signals for you the sector will lead to outsized returns, considering advances in technology, etc.?
Yeah. So that's a great question. We're in a moment of tremendous change, and what got businesses here won't get them to where they need to be from a business readiness and competitive position, call it 5 to 7 years from now. So evaluating technical enablement or technical obsolescence of businesses right now, as it relates to all the things that are coming through tech efficiency and tech AI is real. And to sit here and say, I know the answer to that would be incorrect. But what I think I can say is that, all of our businesses are spending money to be tech enabled and AI enabled to try to use the tools and to train everybody to use them and to be more of not a first mover, a third mover, because we're too small to spend that much money, and trying to use tech to build the businesses that we consider. Step one. Step two is just the government was spending a whole lot of money post COVID, and we were spending more money than we could afford. No matter how you think about this administration, the net reality is that we as a country need to spend less money or we'll have too much of a deficit. Our bond ratings will go up and the quality of our life will go down in the US because we basically are living check to check or don't have the money to pay for our expenses. And so this sort of crash cost savings program that's being run through the US government right now, it's difficult, it's terrible, but at the end of the day, it could be done politer and nicer, but the same thing would happen. We need to spend less. And so as that happens, there's going to be job loss and there's going to be businesses that go out of business. There's going to be revenue that used to be 100 that now will be 80 and 70 and 60 over the next 12 to 24 months. Many people think that's when you don't go out and try to find a business. It is in these moments of dislocation where you see sales going down and employees being let go that the best buying opportunities can happen. In the public stock market, you hear it as buying the dip. This is maybe not a dip but a correction. And the correction is just because of tech changes and different spending from government, what have you. There's going to be a correction from what used to be $100 business is now going to be an $80 million revenue business. And if you can figure out how to buy it when it corrects to 80, then you'll be buying at the new normal price. And that'll give you more opportunity to hopefully grow it back to 100 over the subsequent 5 years. And so I think my comment is you have to be scared of the tech enablement and advancements because we don't have a crystal ball, but we know it's here and it's going to rapidly change all of our lives over the next 3 to 7 years, maybe 3 to 7 months. We know there's a downshift in spending and that old revenue is going to be lower than new revenue in the coming 12 to 24 months. But if you have a little bit of patience and you can buy at a dip at a lower price, you should be safe on the downside and then be able to build a business that can tremendously make a whole lot of money coming up. For me, I've made more money in 2000 and 2001 a correction, 2008 correction, 2020 to 22 correction. We probably made hundreds of millions of dollars buying in those dips, if that makes any sense.
So the second question is, how do you decide when to exit or sell a business?
It's a good question, and it's two answers. So I bought 8 businesses on a deal by deal basis where I have friends who are invested with me, and we own 51% or more of these companies. So we don't have to sell them. We can have a quote holding company where I have this $1 billion of revenue. And once you've taken enough money out so all your investors are happy, so the theory is you tell your investors every 3 to 5 years, we're going to ring the cash register bell and we're going to give you some money back. So I make a concerted effort every 3 to 5 years to return capital on investments. Um, and when I have to, I'll sell it. We sold Lafada because we bought this business, Car and Duff, for $100 million, and they both work with the same company, and the company considered us to have a conflict and said we had to sell one. So yeah, we made good money, but if we didn't sell it and just recapped it, we would have made probably 50 times our money at Lafada if we had held it for another 3 to 5 years. So exiting businesses when you don't have to and when you're, not ready to retire generally leaks money. I met Carlton Highsmith back in 98, 99. He built an incredible business he'll tell you about, and he sold it because he was tired. But the truth of the matter, if he had owned it for another 10 years, he'd probably have made another 50 to $100 million. And so the concept of selling when you own outright one business at a time is mostly you sell when you're ready to retire and do something else, which your life purpose. Um, when it's in an institutional fund, like the fund I just raised, well, we told our investors, or we tell our investors, we're going to have their money for 10 years, five-ish to invest it, and 5 years to harvest it and sell it. So you see private equity buy and sell in a 3 to 7 year window. And that's why they do that, because they've told their investors they'll be in and out in 10 years. But if you can buy one thing and tell your investors you'll give them money every 3 to 5 years, it's in your best interest to do that as long as you love the forward prospects of that business. And that's what we did in our food business. We gave them 15 times their money, which is, a tremendous return. And we still think we have another 15 to 30 times to go get because we retained the same ownership. We just took in some debt, paid a distribution, and continue to own a business we love.
Alrighty, the last question is, have you ever used creative ways to finance a purchase that leveraged other resources besides hard cash?
So in my world, people talk about the success and not the failures. And so in 2010, I've been advocating for minority business for a while. I picked up advocating for some legislation for minority and women in New York. I pissed off the comptroller's office, and they retaliated against me by telling my firm they won't do business with me. And so I got fired from the firm that I met Carlton in, which was a private equity firm. I lost all my network. I lost my ability to raise capital from traditional sources. And I sued these people. And so over the course of the next 4 years, I spent my savings on lawsuits, call it $3, $4 million. And by the time I found my first acquisition, I was out of money. And I went to the seller, and the creative financing was, hey man, I love you. I think I can help you build your business, but I'm out of money. Can you give me a seller loan to buy your business? And so I bought that business, no money down, but a handshake that I would give him back the $1 million he owed me. I raised $1.2 million from my friends. I took a $300,000 financing fee, and then the seller actually loaned me $1 million to basically speak for the $2.5 million we invested in that business. So the answer would be the most creative source of capital really is the seller. If you gain their trust and they have the belief that you can help their business succeed, maintain itself and then grow, They are looking for a steward of their business that will treat their people right and their customers right and will carry the legacy of their business. And they're the most likely creative financing source you can find.
All right, I think that pretty much concludes the Q&A portion. We have no more questions online.
Yes, thank you so much for rejoining us this morning and making it happen for us. We really appreciate you participating. And we welcome you always to come back and join us. So thank you again. Let's give Taurus a round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me back, and to Peter and Carlton. Again, congratulations on all you're doing at Connecticut Can Corporation. I think it's incredible what all of you guys do day in and day out, and with any of the entrepreneurs. Feel free to email or call. We'll try to take a few minutes. I think the mentorship aspect of, me seeing Carlton build the business he's about to tell you he built helped me know I could do it when I left to try to do it on my own. And so the can't be what you can't see, it applies every day to me and it applies to you. And I hope that, through this conversation and many that you'll have, that you just have the mindset that if you can buy a house, is something I like to say. Most people know you can get 80% debt to buy a house and 20% equity. Well, you can get 50% debt to buy a business, and you can get your friends and others to help you raise the equity to buy that business. And businesses create more long-term wealth than do house ownership. And we just hope that more of you seek that opportunity for wealth creation and impact within our communities. So again, thank you so much for inviting me back.
I'd now like to welcome up Carlton Highsmith, founder and CEO of Specialized Package Group and Concat and Concord board chair. Welcome, Carlton.
Thanks, Akiva. Another round of applause for Taurus, please. Isn't he amazing? We wanted to give you two examples today. One, a $1 billion serial acquirer who built a $1 billion business, and my business, which is essentially what Taurus would call legacy founder business that was built through acquisitions. I was probably 40 years ago, my young daughter, who was a kindergartner at the time, came home and said that she had to take me to school for show and tell. She had stood up that first day, as most of the kids did, to tell what their dad did for a living. And she said that my daddy designs, manufactures, and sells empty boxes. Now that generated a number of questions from the class, the teachers: who buys empty boxes? Well, I was introduced to this industry of packaging as a recruited out of college to find out that the plastics paperboard packaging industry is $340 billion globally. And by 2034 will be $560 billion. So I was intrigued by the size of this industry and would never have known anything about it were it not for the luck of going to work for a global packaging company. I worked for that company for 10 years. Okay. I worked for that company for 10 years, gaining lots of experience and expertise in paperboard, packaging, and plastic composites. What I want to do today is tell you about a company that I founded in 1983 in a small basement office in New Haven, Connecticut, and how that company grew over the next 35 years to become one of North America's largest paperboard packaging manufacturers. I'm going to talk about two strategies that we have deployed. One is strategic alliance, And I'm going to give you the example of the two acquisitions that propelled our company to its size. This is a company that I founded in 1883. We were one site that based in our office. Our revenues were under $500,000. There were 3 of us who worked in the company at that time. And by 2009, we had grown to become North America's 7th largest manufacturer of paperboard packaging. We had 5 manufacturing plants. We had nearly a decade of 9% growth over that period, over that decade. Our industry is dominated by large billion-dollar competitors. If you're going to be successful in this industry, you have to focus on segments, and that's what we did. We focused on segments that we thought that we could compete effectively, where we had an advantage in technology and location and expertise. And so we became North America's largest manufacturer of oral care cartons. We produce all of Crest for Procter & Gamble, all of Canadian Colgate, and for SmithKline and French, their Aquafresh brands. Fabric care, we became the nation's largest manufacturer of paperboard packaging for dry laundry detergents. And we created in 1999 a brand new category called surface care. Received a phone call from Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati who said they had a project called D1. It's going to revolutionize surface cleaning. And they were looking for a company that could help them globally launch this initiative. We didn't know what it was called, but they said, you're going to have to be able to support the manufacturers of devices that we are having produced in North Vietnam, in China. So you're going to have to be able to support that business from a design engineering standpoint, provide your drawings and specifications to the manufacturers locally who will make the packaging for those devices that go with this product. Here again, I had no idea what this product was. They were talking about Swiffer. So our company did all the global design engineering work for Swiffer when it launched in 1999. And our plants in London, Ontario, and upstate New York and Radisson produced all the boxes for the disposables that go along with Swiffer. A lot of these products have very aggressive chemicals. It requires lots of technology from a laminate standpoint to protect them through the distribution process. So we focused on segments of this huge billion-dollar industry, focusing on those areas where we could compete and win effectively. Here again, this is what we looked like across the country. 5 manufacturing plants, 3 design engineering centers. These are our manufacturing plants. Our largest would be in the middle there. That would be outside of Syracuse, New York. We had over 500,000 square feet of manufacturing across North America to produce the products that you see here. Here again, oral care was our largest segment. Fabric care, we did the brands for all of the major dry laundry manufacturers in North America. Home care, personal care, healthcare, nutritional, and pet care. We built a plant in Lenexa, Kansas, next to Clorox, because Clorox gave us a 10-year contract to produce all of the packages for their pet care, for their cat litter. And Clorox owns the 3 major brands, Fresh Step, Scoop Away, and Evergreen. How did I do that? How do I take a little basement office company of 3 people and transform it over the next 35 years into a company the size of the one that I built? My first major strategic move was something called a strategic alliance. In 1984, I formed a strategic alliance with a company called Lawson Mardon, based out of Mississauga, Ontario. Lawson Mardon had been part of British American Tobacco, but there was a large management buyout that happened in 1983, the same year I formed my business. where the managers in Canada bought the global packaging business from British American Tobacco. And their division in Canada was known as Lawson Mardon. So they changed the name of this global packaging company to the Lawson Mardon Group. It was originally a $2 billion business when they bought it. They did what you did with most leveraged buyouts, management buyouts. They divested of over half the assets to pay down their debt. And they were left with this billion-dollar business of really high quality package manufacturing businesses all over the world that usually were there to support their tobacco businesses. And what the management team in Canada realized is that they needed to penetrate the United States. They had no manufacturing sites in the United States at the time, and they needed to grow in the largest consumer market on the planet. And they were looking for companies like mine, who had a foothold here, who had industry expertise. And so I did a strategic alliance with Lawson Mardon in 1984. This strategic alliance was born out of the fact that they wanted to grow the United States. I wanted to expand my business. I needed someone like them who had global presence, expertise in those markets that I was targeting. And so it was a tremendous opportunity for two separate companies to come together in a strategic alliance and benefit both businesses. I can't tell you the value that this generated for me. The relationships I formed with the Canadian management group, their plants around the world. I had initiatives for Johnson & Johnson that we launched in North America, but manufactured in Lawson Mardon plants in Germany, because the technology for making the toothbrushes is in Germany. So this was a tremendous entree for me. And as I will explain later, what happened in 1994 was that Lawson Mardon was purchased by Alu Swiss Lanza. Alu Swiss Lanza was a large global chemicals, aluminum packaging business. And that was fantastic for us because now we were part of a bigger global enterprise that we could leverage. But in 1997, Sergio Marchionne became the new CEO of Alu Swiss Lanza. That same Sergio Marchionne who was the Fiat Chrysler guru. He was at the time was running AL. He decided that certain of their businesses around the world were not strategic. And he made this monster announcement that he was going to divest of $800 million of assets. That got a lot of us in the industry excited because we were wondering which assets he was going to divest of. And we were looking at North America. What assets in North America were going to be divested? By that time, they built one plant in Radisson, New York, and they put it together with another plant in London, Ontario. They called the Lawson Mardon North America Group. And as it would be, they announced that that group was being sold. I knew the managers of that business. I knew that business really well, had worked with them on several initiatives. And so I made up my mind that I was going to go after growing my business through an acquisition to acquire that division. Put together the team of lawyers and accountants, put together a package, non-binding offer. Long story short, we were chosen as a final bidder, and we closed on that transaction in August of 1998. And I went from a small package design engineering business to now one linked with a manufacturing business. And we go from revenues of $15 million to now revenues of $45 million with an additional 300 employees. But I wasn't done. One of the things that I think is important, and Taurus touched on this, is that getting the transaction across the finish line is not easy. It takes some ingenuity, some luck, but it's harder to integrate it. It's harder to make it a success after you make the acquisition. I clearly knew this business I was buying. I knew the synergies that we could have together. And so I looked at these synergies, what was possible, and I took the COO of this business, Robert Garapi. We didn't have money to hire consultants, but we did have 20 plus years of industry experience between the two of us. We locked ourselves in a hotel room in Montreal, between Elizabeth, for an entire weekend. And we said, okay, now we own this business. How are we going to make it successful? And we started to go through all those things that we had heard as industry experts. What were those dissatisfiers? What were those things that customers did not like about the people who are currently supplying them? What are the gaps? What are the opportunities? And we came up with a laundry list of those things that needed to be done differently if you're going to succeed as a new entrant. And we were essentially a new entrant. We heard things like, we're not getting enough innovation from this industry. We heard that we don't have specialists anymore. We don't have craftsmen anymore. We heard we don't have people who execute with excellence anymore. Why is it so difficult to launch a new initiative? We heard, we don't have enough people who continuously improve quality, deliver on lower cost continuously. And so we ended up coming up with, we called it our SMART model, where we said, we're going to launch this business with these 4 business disciplines. First discipline is going to be, we will recognize we will not be able to serve all segments of this industry. It's too large. Where are those spots? Where are those markets? Where are those segments where we think that we can excel based on the toolkit we have, the technology we have, the expertise we have? We call that our strategic business development team, that top tier. I own that. I was a sales and marketing product development guy. So the entire sales marketing organization worked for me in making sure that when we look for new initiatives, new opportunities, they were strategic. Our product development, BDI, as we call it, the next going clockwise. We grew up as a package design engineering company, innovation, right? That was core to who we were. So we're going to make sure that we can deliver leading edge innovation in this space because customers are demanding more of it. So PDI became a discipline within our organization owned by Robert Garapi. PIV at the bottom, that was perhaps the most important of those business disciplines that we decided to bring forth because we kept hearing over and over and over again from the large consumer products companies, we don't have packaging companies who operate with excellence. They don't manage change well. They don't launch new initiatives well. And so we have an entire documented disciplined stage gate process where we will not launch any initiative unless it goes through our PIV. We don't make any changes to any process, any material, unless we go through a PIV. If you wanted to get reprimanded or even terminated from our company, make a change and not do a PIV. That was sacred. Then our final business discipline was around continuous improvement, focus improvement teams. Employee-based, owned by our plant managers, always working on ways to improve quality, lower cost. Some of our PIV teams, focus improvement teams, that customers that were part of those teams to help drive the process. So if I were to point to any single thing that was caused our success over those years, it's our SMART model. Not the acquisition themselves, because those could have failed, would have failed, were it not for this disciplined process. And I do have a sheet of this, so I don't want you to necessarily follow this in your businesses, but I need for you to sort of focus in on, you got to have some way of differentiating yourself as you go to market. All 600 of our employees understood our SMART model. They knew what role they played in helping us be successful. This one transaction, the prior one, was very formal. It was orchestrated by Credit Suisse First Boston. As you saw there, they were an investment banking firm. They went through a very formal process. We had lots of things we had to do to qualify and ultimately finance that transaction. This one is very untraditional. This Focus Packaging was founded by Les Davis, a tremendously smart entrepreneur who understood new technology that was emerging, web flexographic print technology. And he not only would he recognize the technology was emerging, he knew its application in certain market segments. He particularly saw oral care for this web flexo technology as being something that was really important for him. So he built a plant in Kentucky with his web flexo technology that served Colgate, producing all of Colgate for North America. He'd won a contract for Procter & Gamble with his technology to produce oral care for them. It was a business that we desperately wanted. But because he was so aggressive, he won that opportunity. We knew that business really well, and we thought that he made some mistakes. We thought that he had underbid. So I started to develop a relationship with Les just to assess what was going on in that with him and that P&G business. Ultimately, after 3 dinners, he revealed that in fact he was struggling with that business and he was looking for an exit. But he had an exaggerated sense of value. I offered to buy him. He gave me a price. It didn't really make a lot of sense. He allowed us to do some due diligence, and we found he was underwater. So ultimately, what we did with this Focus acquisition is that we bought this business for no money. We simply assumed his debt, his liabilities. Went to his bank. He had a guarantee with his bank, got him up underneath that guarantee, worked with his suppliers. We classified the suppliers into 3 categories: suppliers that were $100,000 or less, suppliers that were $250 to $500, and suppliers that were $500 or above. All the smaller suppliers we paid off in 6 months. The next mid-tier we paid off in 12 months, and then larger suppliers we paid off in 2 years. So we're able to buy that business creatively without any money down. This ended up being our most profitable division because not only did we learn how to make that business, turn that business around and make it more profitable, we got to understand how web flexo worked, and our guys became really expert at it. So when we expanded our other plans with web flexo, we understood how that worked. So these are my sort of recommendations on doing acquisitions. Because I knew this industry and all of my acquisitions were in my industry, you should really understand the business that you're buying. Understand what the value of that business is. How are you going to go about valuing it? What is it really worth? Make sure that you have a sense as to how you're going to pay for it. One of the things that you have as a handout here, with the very first acquisition I did, you'll have I have a source use statement for you. These are actual documents that you can see back in 1998, what my planned sources were, what they actually ended up being to meet that $24.7 million purchase price. I think that I'm at the end. I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much.
We'd like to welcome any in-person questions first while we wait for some questions to come through the chat. Speak now or forever hold your peace. We have a question in the back here.
Thank you. Thank you. Carl, how did you
We had an industry that was consolidating. There was enormous opportunity with our industry. A lot of mistakes had been made over the years with overinvestment. There was tremendous overcapacity in our industry. And the only way to really grow was through acquisition, whether you're going to participate in this acquisition frenzy or not, because there were really no growth opportunities. So as we assess risk, acquisition became the least riskiest of the options in front of us. There were just so many manufacturers chasing not so great a big pie that you just had to look at inorganic growth as an option, because organic growth is not going to happen.
Thank you. Have another question here.
A good day. I'm Gabriel, an MBA student at the University of New Haven, and I have a question. When we go to school, our minds are already processed to just go out there and look for jobs. But since I've been here, I've been inspired because of the entrepreneurial journey of your business, and yeah, it's a good aspiration to me. So, what's something you wish young graduates or young professionals really understand about the business world for starting out, opportunities, how to approach everything and await success?
Well, I think there's imperative that you have some sense as to, what your passion is, right? What interests you. And of course, you have to have some expertise in some area. And my counsel always is that, follow the passion, of course, but you have to have some expertise in the space at which you want to enter as an entrepreneur. Recall I said that I spent over a decade as a corporate executive in the packaging space before I opened my design engineering business in New Haven. So I came to this journey of entrepreneurship with a Rolodex, some experience, expertise in industry contacts. So my counsel always is that you want to go into a business that you know something about. I think that is sort of a given. And then follow your passion and go in stages. If I look at the growth of my business, for the first 14 years, we were a package design engineering business that I could fund, self-fund, without the need for a lot of outside capital. Because when you start to do acquisitions and grow inorganically, that you have to look for sources of capital. And it's lower risk if you also have businesses that require lower front-end capital.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that's responsive.
Thank you, Carlton. We have another question here.
Carlton, I love this idea of strategic alliance. Can you share more insight or advice on how to start and form relationships with companies that I may not have a relationship with, who understand a business that I may not, but I know the potential? And so by partnering with them on a potential acquisition, there's a win for the both of us.
Yeah, well, I think strategic alliances are formed out of sort of mutual need for something, right? Where each company wants to achieve some goal or objective that is going to be more difficult for them to achieve alone. If I take the example of Lawson Martin, incredible company with great manufacturing expertise around the world, but no access to US markets. So what do? They try and build their own. That's going to be a really hard lift for them to establish their own regional sales, marketing organizations, their own product development folks. They would much rather say, okay, is there someone there now who is good in that space that I could partner with and help them while giving me access to that market? What I found that strategic alliances work when you can identify someone in your space that can help you, and vice versa. They are helped by what you bring to them. So I think it's hard to look outside of an area of your expertise, your business, unless it's complementary, as an example, right? If you're in the floral business and you partner with a caterer, who has bridal events, whatever, then that makes some sense to me. It's complementary, right?
Thank you, Carlton. Oh, I have another question here.
Carlton, thank you again. It's always great to hear your story. I learn something new every time. Much appreciated. My question is, we work with a number of the MBEs who are looking at this approach in organic growth. You know, one of the challenges, they start looking at companies that are for sale. They start reviewing their verticals and where they want to go. But I'm trying to push them towards, and maybe you can comment on the first basics of getting the financing, talking to your current lenders. What do you get ready to prepare for before you even take the approach of looking at an LOI, for example?
That's an incredibly important question. My really big acquisition, the one in '98 with Lawson Mardon, my partner was Steve Festa. Steve Festa was my relationship manager at Fleet Bank. He had banked me throughout my design engineering business, and so he knew me really well. And we talk often about my wanting to do an acquisition. And he always promised that he would be there to help. And so as I got nearer to this transaction, we were sort of brainstorming how can we put together the stack. We realized, because this industry is very capital intensive, there was going to be a term piece associated with that from a senior lender. There was going to be a revolver piece, because in a manufacturing space like this, as you know, you get advances like elements of working process, AR, payables. So we knew that was going to be a piece. I knew there had to be some cash equity brought by the purchaser. Where people usually trip up, though, is there's always a gap. There's always a slice that you got to fill somehow. We filled it with a mezzanine lender, and this mezzanine lender was actually brought to us by by Steve Festa. So we modeled out what our stack would look like before I made my offer. And if you'll look at the document I'm going to distribute to you here, you actually see my capital stack. I disclose it. This is how I pulled it off. I gave my sources and my uses. And you'll see attached to it is a document that I was in a frenzy writing my lawyer, because a sophisticated seller was looking to manage down net working capital. And that was going to cause a problem for me at close, because I was not going to have the AR levels I needed to get that advance rate, to use a revolver to close the transaction. So my counsel always is, be friends with your banker, your financier, have a sense as to what it's going to cost to do the acquisition, and model it out in advance and test it. Is this going to be stressed? If I stress this, will it work? And you'll see the stress that I was under, because I barely managed to meet the advance rates to get that $25 million I needed for that transaction in '98, because the seller was managing down net working capital.
Thank you, Carlton. We have another question here in person. We have a few virtually.
Carlton, like others, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I always learn a lot every time I hear you speak. My question relates to strategic alliances again.
Mm-hmm.
What are a couple of things we should watch out for when considering a strategic alliance? And I ask this because we were approached by someone who talked strategic alliance. Clearly, he only wanted access to our client list and really wanted us to be a sales force for him. We did not see any mutual benefit to the alliance, so we walked away, although it looked like tremendous dollars up front, but it didn't make any sense. So what are a couple of things we should watch out for in the future?
Yeah, I'll go back to my earlier answer. It's got to be mutual benefit. Both entities have to benefit from the alliance. If there's not mutual benefit, it will never work. Carlton, I always look for trust too. And there are ways you can tell. I mean, you got to understand what's driving that person to want to partner with me. So I'd look at, can I trust this person? Give me some people to talk to that you've done business with, that I can sort of test this level of trust that I have with you. And when I did that alliance with Lawson Mardon, the team that they put in front of me, as solid as they come, and you could tell. And so I always look for trust, Carlton. I mean, that to me is more than anything else. And there's got to be mutual benefit. If there's no mutual gain, I don't understand how an alliance works. I don't. I did not share with you a joint venture that I did in 1990, 2001 that failed. International Paper put together, Daimler Chrysler put us together to do a joint venture in Detroit to build a plant to manufacture a brown box for all parts. A space totally different than what we knew. They really reverse sold us on the idea, because as we took this opportunity through our smart model kept telling us no. That customer we don't know, the technology we don't know, there's no innovation in that space. It's auto parts, it's brown box, the materials you don't know, but it kept saying no. But Daimler Chrysler was so persuasive in that we will give you this contract. And so we did it, and we lost $3 million before we pulled the plug in 18 months. We couldn't trust the team that we got from International Paper, and I don't want to disparage them, but the team was very untrustworthy. They had plants that we were competing with in the Detroit area, and they did not want us to succeed.
Thank you.
Carlton, I noticed that your first acquisition, you put in first a non-binding offer of $40 million. And then you end up buying it for $24 million.
Yep.
Did you purposely put a big number up there to get in the room, to be one of the first three?
You're very astute to observe that. What you do, and actually I have it with me. I kept it after all these years. This was their offering memorandum. They prepared this and sent this to everyone who was interested in buying it. And some who would call this a fantasy book, right? It tells you all the things. If everything goes wonderfully well, this is what's going to happen to the business. And so the valuation, Paul, was very simple. Multiple of 6, because that's what the multiple is in our industry. Looked at last year's actual, this year's forecast, and next year's plan, the average of those 3. That was how you value the business. And so what they told me, the business was worth $40 million. But then when diligence happened, and I looked at the adjustments that actually happened to last year's results, okay, I understand that now. That number is different. This year's forecast, there's sensitivities here, which you haven't captured, and your plan next year, how are you going to grow up 20%? I don't understand. Document that. So by the time we were done, really digging, that EBITDA number that they've given us in this book ended up being significantly lower. So that explains the difference in purchase price. But it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of digging, and a lot of knowing the industry, right? So we're able to ask the tough questions, and they would answer in a certain way. Well, that's a sensitivity. That's a $400,000 impact. That's a $300,000 impact. And that's how we got the purchase price from 40 to 24.2 or something, 22.5. But yeah, part of it was, well, if what you say is true, that's your price. But it tended not to be true.
Thank you. Before we take any questions from the chat, are there any more questions in the room? Okay, thank you. I'd like to hand it over to our co-directors online to take chat questions.
Okay, we just have one question online. This is a fantastic breakdown. How did you insert your culture into the companies that you acquired, value systems, etc.? Could you speak to that?
Because culture is everything. One of the things that I did, I failed to mention, is I wanted all of our management team aligned with our values. And so I carved out equity pieces for all of the top managers in our company. So they had an equity stake. So our mission was aligned. Our goals were aligned. And we believe in one system. If you went to any of our plants with the same colors, the same scheme, the same employee systems, we were very adamant about we will treat each other the same at all of our locations. Much like what Concat has a sense of values, we had a sense of values that these are really important to us. Even our unionized plant, we had a unionized plant in London, Ontario. Our people systems there were pretty much the same as they were across the network. Of course, we had things like seniority rules that we had to abide by, but essentially our people systems were exactly the same. Our people were empowered to make decisions. We had a robust focus on training and advancing your skills. Those were the same across the entire network. We try to have consistent pay practices, and we had to affect sometimes because of the union environment, of course, but other differences in cost of living, Connecticut versus Kansas versus North Carolina. But we try to be consistent across the network because culture so important to us. It drove people buying into our smart model. And what I would say, if you would ask any of our 600 employees to walk through for you our smart model, they would. And we do this presentation, and it was an executive at Procter & Gamble who said to us, you guys should copyright that. So when you take your handout, you'll see there's a little copyright at the end, at the bottom of it, because we still own it.
Amazing. Thank you, Carlton. I believe that's all the questions that we have virtually. And Carlton, I have to say, as many times as I've heard your presentation, I always have an aha moment when we get questions in and just hearing new things about your journey. So I really appreciate you continuing to come back
My
and
pleasure.
share that with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Let's give Carlton a round of applause.
And I would encourage you, as you leave, to take any of these products with you as a memento of remembrance of today.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give a warm round of applause to all of our presenters for today. Again, I'd like to say thank you to Carlton Highsmith, Peter Hurst, and Mustafa Analui, and all of our team, Concord team, Quinnipiac University team, and GNE team for making this happen. As they've previously stated, this is our kickoff event for this workshop series. So now that you've registered and attended today, you will be in the know on the next upcoming workshop. So we'll conclude today with a networking hour. So feel free to enjoy more breakfast in our cafe and lounge area. And also you can come back to the space to talk a little bit more with our speakers today. But again, I'd like to continue to welcome you all back to the lab. Some of you, I believe half of you in this room have been to the space and have attended our programming. We are continuing to advance our space and expand. So continue to stay connected with us. And we welcome you back all the time. Again, this concludes our presentations for today, but please enjoy the networking hour. Thank you all.